Alright, so let's go ahead and get started on exercise 3. Some of you guys might have already gotten started. That's great. You're welcome to work alongside. But for this next one is obviously Rhino 3D and 2D, just like we saw in last time. So let's just read them out. So step number 1, create a 30 by 30 square frame to compose in 2D operations. Alright, fair enough. Step 2, create a 5 by 5 grid system that references as center points 2D operation. Sure. Step 3, using only 12 lines, 6 orthogonal planes, and 3 curved lines and 3 points, compose your abstract diagram. Now that's pretty loose. To be fair, in the past, especially students who've taken my D1, they sort of revamped their musical abstraction projects. So some of them took like a piano, some of them took a guitar and abstracted it in their own way. Some students gravitated towards art, right? Or perhaps you remember your organizing principles, right? Everybody got that in D1, so they referred to the rhythm, the balance, the hierarchy, and some of the other organizing principles in order to achieve some sort of abstraction in 2D. As you can see, I kind of give some examples. This is kind of what we're going for today, right? And in fact, I'll kind of mimic it or copy it, or at least make it my own today. And essentially what you want to end up with is an abstraction concept model, right? So essentially for this assignment, we just want to make art, right? I mean, what could be more fun than that? However, I don't need you to just make one of them. We need you to make 3 of them. So thankfully, you don't have to do this by hand. I'm not asking you to model this or start cutting chipboard or anything like that, which obviously can take a lot of our time, power, effort, energy. So we want to be able to use this program in its most efficient way. So in our case, it's pretty open-ended. So let's start with the first 3 steps. Create a 30 by 30 square. Sweet. And I do know that I'll eventually need 3 of them. So I'm going to go ahead and hit rectangle. I'm going to switch to my layers and make this a little bit bigger. Not a fan of, oh man, why'd I do that? Get back in there. There we go. Not a fan of how small the screen is, but it'll do. So let's get a rectangle in there, 30 by 30, 30 feet, enter, 30 feet, enter, pretty small. Now, one of the first steps is, of course, to make some sort of grid system, right? Most of us are pretty familiar with a grid system, right? It either comes in a 2x2, a 2x4, a 4x4. Usually it's in some way congruent, right? So there are some tools that we can use, and you know, there's a lot of different ways to make grids, right, to be fair. But let's start off pretty simple. Let's go over a few different ways we can make some grids. So I'm going to go ahead and explode my 30 by 30. And I'm going to go ahead and take this line and array it. Right? So that is a command. I'll type in array. And what's nice is it even asks me, you know, what would you like? I would like 5 in the X direction, 5 in the Y direction. That sounds pretty good. And in the Z direction, just 1, because I don't need anything else. But essentially what's kind of nice is I can make a grid pattern. Sort of 5 by 5. And if I wanted to make it equal to something, I could, but as you can see right now, not exactly equal to anything. I can't really sort of get there, if that makes sense. So what I could do is take one of these lines and hit divide. And what's nice about it is it'll divide it into a number of points that I need. So in my case, I need a 5 by 5, not 105, but that's pretty cool that you can do 105. Sweet. So now I've got 5 perfect separate pieces. I'm going to hit enter again and do 5 as well. So obviously that'd be a very congruent grid, right, to say the very least. And now I can take these pieces, if you will, and just get a series of points, right? So I can copy from that point and so on. I can lock on right onto my points. And as long as I got that last one, I don't think I did. Oh, let's try again. This is why you can't have near on, and sometimes center can get in the way too, actually. Copy, lock onto that point, And there's definitely one way we can make some grids, right? Let's try another way. 30 by 30. Sweet. Move it in place. Because after all, I mean, there's nothing in the thing that says I can use the same grid pattern. I mean, there's nothing that says I can't either. So don't get me wrong, you could copy this 3 times, or you can try what I'm doing here and, you know, mix and match up for yourself. Let's go ahead and explode that again. Now I'm just gonna get fancy with the spices. Right? Maybe I want something a little bit more abstract. Maybe I want actually a golden ratio. Anybody remember how to draw the golden ratio? Take a midpoint to your adjacent, rotate it. Man, how easy would this have been? And right, golden ratio proportion right there. Right, get that piece. I can take that line, even take that measurement. I can move it wherever I like. Get a new midpoint and get a new line. All right, so I can copy that. What I'm trying to say here is I can give it a little bit more order than just regular, right, to say the least. I can do it again. Right, I could take another square. Of course, I inverted it inward, so we don't really need that line anymore. All right, we're getting some grids here. Let's go ahead and use them. So I'm just going to copy the lines that I already have. I mean, why work harder when I can just work smarter? Maybe that's one, and maybe that's one. Nah, I don't like that last one, so I can move it. I don't like it still. There we go. That's a pretty interesting grid. At least we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what I mean is 5 actual spaces, not 5 lines. Come in, guys. If you need to use the computers, please do. Yeah, that's fine.
Is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you. So again, just making that 5 by 5 grid. This one's a little bit based on the golden ratio, and that's pretty neat. And 4, 5. Sweet. Okay, so there's another idea we can use. Of course, it gives us some intersection points, just like we have in intersection points. And to be fair, I could probably think of another way, so let's just copy that one and change it up. After all, I do need 3 iterations, and it makes a lot of sense to try some new things, right? I mean, why do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? That is quite literally the definition of psychotic, right? Doing the exact same thing, but expecting different results. A lot of us find ourselves in life that way, and I gotta say, when you do find yourself in life that way, do something different. You'll probably yield different results. So just changing it up a little bit. And maybe just move stuff around. Still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 spaces. So it does say 5 by 5, I think. Yeah, create a 5 by 5 grid system. Yeah, that totally matches. Got a 5 by 5, 5 by 5, and 5 by 5. Sweet. What's step 2? Well, I don't want to do that all over again, so I'm going to copy it, make it a part of step 2. And you guys know me, I like to stay organized as possible. So let's get some other defining moments in there. Come on, rectangle. There we go. I like to keep track of my steps just in case. You never know, I might have a crazy studio professor who definitely wants to see all of my process. So sweet. Alright, create a 5 by 5, got it. Did 3 of them. Using only 12 lines, 6 orthogonal planes, and 3 curved lines, and 3 points. Compose an abstract diagram. So that's pretty random. Although I'm allowed a couple of things. I can't really put line weight in here just yet. But let's get some stuff in there. First thing I want to do is maybe create some sort of column point. Just because I know eventually I need to make this in three dimensions, so I'm gonna try a couple things. Maybe something of like 12 inches. Oh, that's kind of too big. Sorry, I got the radius. Let's get a diameter on that one. So if I ever want to actually change that, I think by default it is radius. So you can actually make a lot different circles. Let's if you hold over, of course we can get some different circles in there. Yeah, circle by radius. Sweet. So let's do 6 inches. And that's a little bit, I mean, that's a pretty big column. Maybe get a little bit smaller. However, if I wanted to, I could go for a Mies van der Rohe kind of style too. So let's get a little rectangle in there, maybe 6 by 6. Go ahead and move it to its center point, so I'll get a center of a square. It's always fun. Do you guys know about the Mies van der Rohe columns? He always had plus signs for, you know, the profile of his columns. So just to kind of show you how to do that real quick, if we could, let's offset it. Let's go with, I don't know, 4 inches. Sweet. I'll take everything and trim what I don't need. And join it. Oh, can't join inside of a command. That's okay. Take it again, join. Now, I don't want to do that over and over again, so I'm just going to copy it, take my center point, and apply. Right. I do want to be slightly careful, make sure that I do get the point. And to be fair, since this is a pretty orthogonal drawing, I'm gonna get the edge, why not? But yeah, there's definitely a couple I could do, right? Whether it be circle, and I'll actually leave that in there just so you can kind of see what's going on. Don't need the points in there. So I'm gonna take my filter, which is right here, and take out points. Obviously, I don't want to copy my points over and over again. So when I do that, and I go like this, it won't select those points. It shouldn't. Looks like it does. Anyway, let's find out. No? Yeah? Alright, copy. So we need some columns first. Alright, I already got everything right there. I think I'll try the circle on the second one. And I'll probably just do 2 for the tutorial today, right? Just kind of switching up and showing the many different options that you can do with this part of the assignment. We don't really need one actually on the edges. It's not really part of our 5x5. So I'll just take that one and I'll put them on the insides actually. Switch back to my things here. Don't really want the center anymore. Really want the intersections though. Okay, got the intersections. Sweet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess I at least need 4, but that's okay. Of course, I can hold Control or Alt to get rid of a selection. Take a point. So a lot of this is just going to be practicing of a little bit of drawing at first. But essentially we got to make a 2D version first so that we can establish a 3D. So that's looking pretty good so far. I'll take all that and move on to the next step. Again, just kind of keeping track of what I got. Next thing I need is actually a couple lines and things like that. For today, I'm just going to kind of copy this, right? So I can use curved lines, so I could use orthogonal planes, 3 curved lines. You can also use circles. Really not trying to do anything here. Please don't make a clown face, right? Somebody always makes a clown face, and sometimes it's actually unintentionally. So I'm like, what's in your psyche that's like making you create a clown face? But like I was saying, you could gravitate towards an instrument, you could gravitate towards art, you could quite literally just trace another composition. Really not particularly, doesn't really matter, right? I am looking for a little bit of creativity here and a little bit of the organizing principles. But if you haven't taken D1, you don't know anything about those things. So another thing that we could do is actually trace it, and just to kind of show what we can do there, let's go ahead and take this one. Why not? Take a screenshot. Sweet. I'll type in picture and slide that picture in there. So just in case I even just want to kind of have it next to me so that I can be inspired by it, that could be really helpful, especially if I'm only on one screen and I have to constantly go back and forth between them. So I definitely want to change my layer here. Probably go with something that I can like view. Go ahead and create a line and just start composing. I got one line, two lines. I don't know, get some rhythm in there. Probably want to go with straight lines, but get rid of that guy. Let's try again. Orange may not be the best color today. Try not to go outside the box, but I mean you're welcome to. I mean, for the sake of abstraction, absolutely. Let's get some circles involved. Oh, big circle. I like it. Big energy there. Let's go with the half circle thing. Maybe a little bit more rhythms in there. You know, I like the curve too. Don't get too funky with the curves. It's really easy to mess up a composition. But we could dial things in too. Right? I can take the individual points and really get things exactly where I want them. Can even trim them if I feel inclined to do so. And really shape that, move it, you know, what have you. It's looking pretty sweet, kind of like that. All right, I'm gonna go with some rectangles for some maybe large lines. Or, you know, I still need some planes in there, so I don't know, maybe I get one that's a little overhung. I like that. Why not? Maybe we get another one over here. Two. What am I allowed? 6? Yes. 6 orthogonal planes, so I've got 2 already. Let's get some more in there. I kind of like the overlap look too. I don't know, I'm just going for a nice visual balance. You know, if you can't see anything, of course, change the color. Right? But we're starting to get somewhere. 1, 2, 3. And as you can see, it's just a composition. It's an abstraction. It doesn't have to look like a butterfly. It doesn't have to look like anything. But to be fair, if that's what you need, do so. Right? If you want to inspire it off the human body, please do. Right? It's full of golden ratio proportions, and it should be filled with golden ratio proportions then. I wish I had all the examples from last semester though. I kept them, but we moved buildings and I think they did get all thrown away. So, all right, got one abstraction there. Let's maybe take 2. Try something over here. This one's very orthogonal, so I don't know, maybe it lends itself to be a little bit more, what's the word? Boring? No, I'm just kidding. So 2, I'm gonna go for something a little more symmetrical, I guess, because, well, the grids are symmetrical. Or maybe I break that symmetry. That might be kind of cool. So I'm gonna just start off with some hierarchy and some rhythm. So it's sort of big, medium, small. You guys remember those? Hierarchy? Something that we seem to forget in every other studio. We'll do a little one over here, kind of balance that out. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. Let's get some lines in there. So just type in line. Hopefully you guys can see the orange okay? Yeah, okay. See it all right. I don't know, have that one go straight through. I kind of want to do a polyline. Didn't say I couldn't do a polyline. 1, 2, I don't know, I kind of like when they exit the page. Kind of want to do another one. Let's start, I don't know, I can even line it up with something. Sweet. Man, that would have been a lot easier in D1. Got a couple of lines. Let's get a circle in there. Why not? You know, maybe it's aligned to some of these. Maybe it comes off the page. Nah, that's too much. Let's go with a little line. But that's pretty good. Maybe that'll be my fifth one there. I guess I'm still allowed some points. So let's get some points in there. I might need them, I might not. Let's respond to the composition itself. So 1, I don't know, 2, just because they kind of line up there, and I don't know, 3. Why not? Alright, so I got 2 compositions. Let's get those 2 pieces. You know me, I like to copy. Because you never know when I'm going to mess up. And really the next part is probably the hardest, right? So extrude and cap and offset thickness of your lines, planes, and grid into a 30 by 30 by 50 volume, right? So you're kind of allowed a little bit more space here. As you can imagine, eventually these are going to become observation towers, but I didn't tell you that yet, right? So don't think to yourself, oh, observation tower, observation tower. Think to yourself, artistic little model, right? Imagine sort of printing these out and we get a nice little desk ornament, right? Maybe we hang it, you know, it's a piece of art. It's a concept. It's not an observation tower yet, but that is where it is going. So let's extrude it. Let's have some fun with it, right? So I'm going to move to the 3 dimension and zoom in a little bit more on these pieces. Click my viewport, zoom select, and get a little bit closer. So we have our pieces. First thing I could do, get some columns in there, right? I do need to understand what is 50 feet. So might not be a bad idea to kind of take my boundary real quick, copy it, and go up 50 feet. That way I can kind of get an idea of, you know, how far to take things. So 50 feet, enter. If I hold shift, of course it'll put it right there for us. And we can start to see how much volume we have. Alright. First things first, I mean, gotta start somewhere, so let's turn everything off. Oh. I hate how this part's not like Adobe. Adobe, you can kind of just like click and drag. It's really nice. I wish Rhino could get on the ball. But want my grid points, so where'd those go? There they are. And also an advantage of using different layers is you can always turn them off so that you can select all of something. So in my case, let's go back to line work, turn that off. We'll take all these pieces in my case and I'll extrude them. As you guys know from pipe or anything like that. I can immediately actually select 50 feet. So type in 50, enter. Not too shabby. Now there's nothing that says like I need every single one, right? In fact, it just told me to compose something. So I mean, I could dice this up, cut it up, and let's see what we can do with that actually. Turn everything back on, which yes, is sometimes annoying. But let's start taking some of these pieces and working with them. So, I don't know, definitely has a planar element to it, so I'm going to extrude. Oh. Let's go with nothing too big. I do want it to read as a horizontal plane, so I'm going to go with 12 inches. And you can see that it's actually not solid. So one of the things that of course we learned last time is we can cap something, CAP. And it'll of course make it solid for us if we accidentally didn't do that. Now there's nothing that says I have to keep just that one, right? I mean, in fact, I could start to make it float. Right? In fact, I could even start to copy it and give it some rhythm. I think that sounds nice. So I'm going to give it a couple. I don't know. Seems kind of nice. I don't want to break the boundaries too much. I'll keep it at that. Alright. Almost looks too much like, never mind, like a building. Anyway, let's change it up some more. Nobody said I couldn't wire cut or subtract from those, so let's do that. That sounds pretty cool. And I just want to subtract it actually from maybe these two and maybe the last one. Kind of open things up a little bit. So enter, slice all the way through, enter, sweet. Alright, it's starting to get somewhere. Practically an architectural concept right there. Anyway, let's keep going. Maybe get some more planes in there. I've already used that one, so I'm going to delete that one because I've already used it. Don't really kind of want to run into the same things again. Make some volumes, make some masses. So I don't know, extrude here. I don't know, maybe that one's visually demanding, pretty big. And maybe I leave it open. I mean, why not? I don't see why not. Let's give it some thickness though. So I'm going to offset surface. Make some decisions, 6 inches thickness. Really, you kind of want to stay in the 6 to 12 inches kind of range, guys, because eventually, like I said, it's going to be an observation tower. And we don't want 25-foot walls, right, like in thickness. So do be kind of architectural about it. I set it to where there's fillets involved, so I mean, I don't really want that though. It's kind of too much. Let's try that again, offset surface. It looks like it started to fillet the corner. If you don't want it to do that, of course, make it sharp, right? Of course, it's a solid. And again, 6 inches. Yeah, that's much better. Though it's starting to look like a elevator shaft, so I really want it to be more like a spatial component. So I don't know, I'm gonna break the rules a little bit, kind of escape there a little bit. And I don't know, it looks kind of funny, so I'm gonna chop those off. Why not? Boolean split. In fact, I need these 3 pieces or 4 pieces. And Boolean split. So I really want to test some things out. Of course, I need to spell Boolean split. There we go. That guy, that guy, that guy, and that guy, and that guy. Spacebar. Oh, did it wrong, that's okay. Did it do it? Yep, sure did. So maybe I get rid of a couple of them. Oh, looks like it didn't work for some. And that's because it wasn't through it. Alright, so we'll keep that there. And you know, if I find like I want to change it up, I could. Right, for sure. Maybe it's something that's like that, halfway. It is an architectural abstraction. And you may find like, you know what, this is too much, too many grids. That's okay too. So I can get rid of some. Especially the outside ones. I mean, you can either keep them, I'll leave that up to you. Like I said, I don't want to hinder the artistic process too much. But in my case, there's like a cage around it. And I'm not really using it, so I'm just going to get rid of the grid on the outside. Maybe leave one here just in case I want to use it again. But yeah, that's starting to look a little bit more artistic. We got some subtractions here, subtractions there. Let's get this guy involved, why not? Extrude. Alright, not too shabby there. Maybe floats off the ground a little bit, offset surface. Maybe we give it some hierarchy, we'll go with 12 inches on that one. A little thicker. Alright, starting to get somewhere. Keep in mind, we just need a abstract object. And we could do some stuff that starts to float and sort of hang on each other. And of course we can delete things where we see fit, right? Because we definitely don't want machines. We want some visual compositions that at least look somewhat nice and composed. That's looking pretty sweet. I'm gonna extrude that one. I want to make it solid. I'll choose solid. I'll go with, I don't know, 6 inches. And I kind of want to go for a rhythm element. But I don't want to sit there and, you know, draw a whole bunch of them arbitrarily. I really want something that's maybe more calculated. So I'm going to do array. I don't want to sit there and make 25 of them, but I could just type 25, right? Actually, in my case, in the X direction, I want 1. In the Y direction, I want 1. But in the Z direction, I need like 25. Sweet. I'll click and then basically choose the Z direction. And as you can see, it's going to do all that work for me. So I don't know, I can line it up with what I got. I can hold shift to make it a little easier. Oh, try that again. There we go. Enter. Oh, I forgot to press enter. That's okay. 1, 1, and 25. Enter. Click. Maybe I'm in the wrong z-axis. Let's find out. We'll use all 3 views. Array, because I could be. X1, Y1, and Z25. Okay, now it's working. And enter. Sweet. So I got a pretty nice syncopated rhythm, and I didn't have to do jack, right? It's pretty sweet. Although, you know, it's looking pretty closed from the outside, right? I don't know. I might want to think about, you know, how that actually works. In my case, this column is probably going to hold all those pieces, so I think it works out pretty well there. I kind of want to dice it up, so I'm going to take some of my diagram that I already have. Oh, you know, I forgot to get some of the walls too. Let's get some of those. Extrude. Obviously, in your case, you're going to want to spend a little bit of time with it and really kind of artistically build it. What this is really an exercise of is moving around, right? Starting to look at this project for what it is and look at all the different angles. And of course, now you have some tools and things to try out, you know. I don't know, let's make a couple of these actually in the Z direction. So I'm just gonna offset surface, give it some thickness. Let's go with something light, 6 inches. 6, 12, 3, 18 inches. Those are kind of the thicknesses you want to keep into. I don't know, maybe I want some multiples of those. Maybe we have one that kind of addresses the top and maybe one that kind of addresses the bottom. I don't know, maybe it's just one long piece that gets cut through. That's okay too. That might be kind of nice. But as you can see, we're making a very delicate spatial abstraction, right? But it is starting to look very closed. And maybe I get the other wall in there. Did I do that one? No, not that one yet. Extrude. That's looking pretty sweet. Offset surface. Let's go with 6 inches again. Enter. And maybe change it up right there. And Morphosis has got nothing on us. Anyway. In some cases, it looks like my columns are actually too much in some areas. I might consider chopping them off or getting rid of some, especially parts that aren't touching anything. But let's actually influence our elevation direction. So I'm going to select that piece, right? I'm going to copy it and kind of just take it out to the side real quick. I'm going to hold shift so it kind of stays straight. Take the whole piece. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to push it to the side. Right, I could technically line it up perfectly and be quite technical, but I really want to start to influence the elevation side. Oh, looks like it disappeared. That's okay. It's inside there. So again, an exercise in trying to get in there and work things out for ourselves, right? And dare I say, even get inspired by the spaces that you're creating. So let's take that piece. I'm going to wire cut it out and just over specific pieces, right? So I'm going to wire cut and really influence the other direction. So let's maybe subtract from that piece. And you know what? And that piece. Why not? Enter. I'm gonna have it go straight through. Sweet. Enter. All right. Now we're getting somewhere. Pretty interesting. Not too shabby. I mean, eventually we're going to stick some stairs in here, but don't worry about that yet. Like I said, I will teach you how to get the stairs in there, and we'll actually treat it as 2 separate parts, right? However, obviously much more visually engaging now, right? I mean, we're really starting to consider each side of this. And dare I say, if I told you we had to make this into a building, I bet everybody could do that, right? We could start to decide some of the spaces. We could start to dice and chop this up. And relatively speaking, if I knew how to just click print, I could make this by tomorrow and give it to my studio professor and really go, look, ma'am or sir, this is what I'm thinking. Wonderful. Now, of course, the laser cutter is not working this very moment, and we don't know how to even use it yet, right? But we'll definitely get there. We got to start small, right? And luckily, we can do this a million times, and it doesn't cost us a dime, right? In materials, and really all it costs is our time. So, and even arguably then, a lot less of it, right? If I had to make this in class right now, it would take me a couple of hours. And to be fair, this only took me, well, with all the talking, 30 minutes, right? So we're getting somewhere. We got some pieces. I guess I didn't get a circle on that one, but it is very visually interesting, to say the least. Let's see if there's any more options that I need to do and what is being asked of the assignment. So extrude cap, yep, definitely did that to my lines, my planes, and my grid. Sweet. And I did it in a 30 by 30 50. Arguably, I broke the rules a little bit, but that's okay. And obviously there's 2 step 5s here. Sorry, that's supposed to be, of course, a 6. So step 5, compose a 3D model abstraction. Pretty sure we did that. Not too shabby, by the way. And maybe we'll do another one. I mean, obviously we did that one pretty quick, and arguably I can continue with that. You know, I think Mies van der Rohe would be proud as well. We could probably cap those. And arguably, I mean, we could even start to Boolean difference those. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could do here, right? Really start getting fancy with the spices and be very visually interesting. And if you're, okay, there's nobody in my D1, right? Yeah, don't use this. You can't use this for your D1 project, right? Because essentially, I don't know if you guys saw those outside, but it may have reminded you of, you know, early D1, where you guys were just not even a year ago. Some of you a year ago, maybe 2. Anyway, that's pretty much it, at least in terms of modeling. So compose a 3D model, and what's being asked of us, show a minimum of 3 iterations and 2 views each. Right, so not too bad. So like I was saying, we need 3 iterations. That'll be these guys right here. So we'll need to give them line weight, right? We'll need to put those in Illustrator and get them to look a little bit more like this. Something that has some line weight, something that maybe has some thickness, or even, dare I say, color to it. Right, so we'll need our quote-unquote floor plans to these. Right, so let's go ahead and set those up. Maybe in a rectangle. Again, 11 by 17. There's no real scale here again. We haven't touched upon scale just quite yet. I don't want to bog you down too much. Oh man, can I do that? Hold on. Learning something new. See if we can do that. Nah, it doesn't work. I thought it could. It's worth a shot though, right? 11 feet by 17 feet. And of course change that size. I don't know. I find it a lot easier to look at when they're a little bit bigger and they're just in the right ratio. However, I do need 3 of them, so I'm going to copy. Oh. Of course, spell copy correctly. So this would be, say, my abstraction 1. So maybe make a copy of that one. So I do need the floor plan and 2 views, right? So I might need to make a copy of this and take it off into the distance. So I'll keep it over here, and let's take a look at it. Because I might need to make some decisions and kind of figure out what's maybe the best way to look at this. Because it just says views. I mean, don't get me wrong, the orthogonal view can go a long way. But let's face it, a perfect isometric might actually make it look more confusing since it's so orthogonal, right? So for instance, if I change it to set view and go to isometric and choose something like, you know, northeast, it might not be too bad, right? For sure. However, I do want to open it up that you can do architectural views as well, right? So this is kind of our first take of explaining the camera. So I'm going to type in camera, and what's funny is it's actually there, right? But it's just not being shown yet. So when you're in the viewport that you want to see the camera, you're going to type in camera and then click on show, or the letter S if you're on Windows. That'll work as well too. So nothing happens. Well, if you click on all of your things, you can actually see that we can see a camera model here, right? And funny enough, it looks kind of strange in the top view, And it's because it's a parallel line. It's a perfect isometric view. Now you'll notice if I change it to a cone, right? So if I go to set camera and change it to, say, like a 2-point perspective, you'll see that it immediately turns into a cone, right? Starts to mimic actually maybe what our eyes do. Does that make sense, guys? So you may have learned this actually in graphics, that when we draw elevations, when we draw orthographic views, they're not real views, right? You can't actually look at an object in our reality in orthographics. We use orthographics to actually explain the dimensional qualities of objects, right? Just in case nobody ever brought that up in G1 or G2. But the way that our eyesight works is actually 2 cones. We have a stereoscopic vision. And as you can imagine, our brain does actually all the fancy work for us, and it eventually puts in 2 cones for us, and that's why you can't even see your nose unless you think about it. What's really funny is both of your eyes are looking at your nose, but your brain actually cancels it out, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to get too much into the science, but when we use a 2-point perspective, we can definitely make much more dramatic views. As you can see, it looks like we're looking at a building through a drone, right? Arguably. You kind of see it if you squint a little, right? So let's get a view. After all, I don't need an isometric view anymore. It's just saying view. So I do want to leave it open-ended, that you can use an isometric view, you can use a 2-point perspective, and you can use a 1-point perspective accordingly. So let's test a couple of things out, and of course make sure that we're looking at the right model here, because I do want to establish some views. That way, you know, if I accidentally move it like this, oh man, obviously I don't want that view. That really skews the model and doesn't look very good, right? So I do want to dial some things in first with my camera, and as you can see, when I change my perspective, it's really changing this little cone, this cone of vision. Some of you guys may remember directors kind of do this, right? That's essentially what we're messing with. We're messing with kind of the cone of our vision, even though it's, in this case, a pyramid. Anyway, so if you take some of those dots, you'll notice that you can't move them, and it's because we're actually in a set view, right? If you switch it back to perspective, you can actually still change those things. Now it's a less daunting, but we can actually change those now. So if we wanted something sort of like zoomed in, really extremely dramatic, right, we could. Although I don't recommend that too much. Again, we want to make sure that we can tell what the object is. However, let's say we found a perfect view. That's looking pretty sweet. That's looking pretty, I mean, shoot, this is like a money maker right here. Some of you guys are always like, man, I don't know how to show my client a space, or my studio professor a space. And it's like, dude, just make 2D that right there. Start drawing on it. Boom. Architectural idea. But again, maybe you just haven't taken computer graphics yet, so you don't know how to model things, and we haven't practiced enough. So I don't know, let's give it a nice view from the bottom. I'm thinking that's looking pretty good, or even this side's looking pretty cool. And it might be enough to actually give me some clues about opening this up a little bit more. Maybe I wire cut this part a little bit more, or what have you. Anyway, not trying to get too much into detail, but let's say we found the view that we like. Sweet. Let's go ahead and save it. So I'm going to regular click, left click on the arrow. I'm going to go to my set view, and I'm going to hit named views. Now on the Mac, it's going to bring up this window. On Windows, it'll actually be a separate window, right? So it'll bring those up. And if it doesn't, you can always go to your window tool right here, and of course look for that tool. And it's of course called named views, right? So just in case it doesn't pop up, look for named views. Now, as you can see, I already have 2 of them in there, so I'm going to delete those real quick. You should actually start off with 0, right? And what's nice is it actually saves it to the Rhino file so that you can never lose it. So let's say that was good. I love it. Let's do a plus sign. Right, so in my case, I'm going to call it iteration 1, because I do want to stay organized, and call it view 1. Sweet. Let's go ahead and get view 2. Right, maybe I want to do something, maybe I actually do want to get the isometric view. I mean, why not? It might be a great way to communicate this model. It might not. So, And as you can see, my cone has become perfectly parallel, something that isn't possible in reality. You can't view things in parallel. It's kind of weird. But strangely enough, is definitely helpful for us because we constantly measure our drawings and get actual values. So of course you'll want something orthographic when you're doing so. It's very much an architecture and engineering view. But again, would come from the Enlightenment age. Anyway, not trying to make it a history class. But that's looking pretty good, and I want to save that view as well, just in case I need it again. So plus sign, and let's go with iteration 1. And view 2. Sweet. Now, I just remembered, unfortunately, I don't have my Illustrator working today. I thought, I put in the request on Monday, and it's still taking till Thursday, as you guys know from last time. So I might actually have to bring up my video from last year on this one and just kind of show you what the next process entails. But let's go ahead and at least do the Rhino work for it. What's nice is that Rhino has a built-in render engine, right? And it's actually gotten a whole lot better. But the reason why we made those views is, well, let's face it, we're gonna accidentally move this guy, we're gonna accidentally move around, we might change some things, and we might be like, oh man, remember that great view we had? Yeah, me neither, right? Because it's impossible to get back to that exact view. Now my camera is slowing me down, so I'm gonna turn off my camera, type in camera, and hide my camera. I don't need those views just happening all the time. But what's nice, in my named view, I can double click on iteration 1, and it's gonna bring actually the viewport that I was clicked on. So that's kind of funny. I don't actually need that on my top view, so I'm gonna switch that back to top. And something is slowing down my computer significantly. So I'm gonna go ahead and save real quick. And figure out what's slowing my computer down so badly. Activity monitor. If you're ever on a Mac and you want your Control-Alt-Delete situation, it's known as the activity monitor on Mac. And clearly Miro is slowing me down. Get out of here, Miro. Force quit. Anyway, should run a little bit better. That seems to be frozen. That could be doing it too. Get out of here, Miro. Anyway, okay, there we go. Working a little bit better. Absolutely. But yeah, what's nice is as long as you're clicked on that viewport and you double click on the name view, boom, makes that view perfectly for us. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and test this. My computer may freeze, which is why I saved and did things like that. But the next thing that we can do is actually show a rendered view. And what's nice about that is we start to get some shade and shadow elements to it. In my case, I have my render view set to a black background, and we can change that too. In fact, it's this little blue sphere that you see up here. And if we hold down and click that, there's actually 3 different ones that we can choose from. Of course, one actually starts the rendering process. One is actually just a preview, which arguably is kind of the same thing as a rendered process. And to toggle the render settings. So in my case, I'm gonna switch to render settings, and it's gonna bring up our render settings tab. So that's pretty nice. And you'll see that there's actually tons of options in here. So actually it got rid of my tab because I already had it unlocked. And don't accidentally click on it because then it'll start rendering, which is fine, it's not the end of the world if it starts, but it can be annoying when you don't have a lot of processing power. But for this part, we actually want to change some things with the shade and shadow, right? In order to maybe see this object a little bit better, and so that we can eventually put our lines right on top of it, right? And kind of go for the cartoony look instead of this very polished sort of, I like to call it too bright. It almost looks like there's too much like shine on it or something. So let's change those. Let's bring back my settings real quick. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, if you already have your settings enacted, of course it'll actually take away your settings. So in my case, let's switch to maybe like a 360 environment. And keep in mind, especially if you're video recording your own screen, this takes a lot of processing power. So the stronger the computer, usually the better, right? But now we can see our hard shadow lines and really get that view, right? I mean, that's pretty nice. So if we wanted to change it, of course, we can change the sun. So if you type in sun, S-U-N, not S-O-N, it'll bring up our sun and calculations options. So in my case, by default, usually it's off, and you'll kind of see what that does. And there's no shadows if the sun is off. So you definitely want to turn the sun on and use manual control. The reason I say use manual control is because what's nice about the sun is we can literally set it to Greenland at 12:05 p.m. in 1926. I mean, we could really dial in the exact sun calculation of where it would be on the Earth. And that's really nice because, well, in architecture, what do we worry about the most? The sun, especially in South Texas, where, you know, you're not going to put a whole bunch of windows on the west side because it's just immediately going to ignite your building and make it very hot and use a lot of energy cooling it down. So we definitely want to be aware of the sun and its abilities. So what's nice about this, at least for our case, we just want to show off an object. So we're not too worried about the sun, but we can control its intensity, right? As you can see, it really starts to bring out the whites and things like that. And unfortunately, my computer is really slow with this process, so not a great graphics card, and it's using a lot of processing power to record it, unfortunately. Don't worry, I'm in the market for a new computer. Also, if you're in the market for a strong computer too, I'll probably sell this one for like $400. So, you know, let me know if you're looking for a computer. But yeah, let's see. We can change the direction, right? The azimuthal direction. So like the north, and you can see that it starts to change the heading of that. Obviously, just like a photographer, you never want to take a picture where the sun is behind you. You always want to kind of go to an eastern light, that way we can start to project some shadows, or a western light, again, to project some shadows. Another thing is you don't want to be facing the sun, right? Otherwise you're going to be in the shadow. Does that make sense? Most of us have probably taken a photography class or two, or have even just tried to take pictures, and you realize that, of course, when the sun is facing the person that you want to take a picture of, it lends better results when there's a little bit of shade and shadow on their face. But regardless, this is looking pretty good, and as you can see, I'm getting the other model in there, so I may even need to push this model a little bit further. I think my background is actually what's causing so much destruction, so I'm going to switch back to a background color and switch to something like a white. Although that's pretty cool too, and if I was doing this for studio, bam, got a background, right? You can also choose a translucent background, which is pretty nice too. So if I wanted to put in my own sky, of course I'm getting a little far ahead of myself. So anyway, let's see if Illustrator will work today. I don't think it will, but let's say this was good. You know, I'm gonna take my render. So really for this process, you just need to take a screenshot, right? We don't really need a render. And to be fair, I would want to get some of the shade and shadow quality about those. So I don't know, maybe I do switch this to a gradient so we can see it a little, yeah, there we go. You can see it a little bit better. I'd always want to double click on those pieces, right? That way I know that the camera is locked in perfectly. So again, just to kind of show you what we want to eventually do in Illustrator, I'm actually going to do it in Rhino right now, but just keep in mind that this next part will be in Illustrator. I just can't open it up. And in fact, I do have a video that you can refer to where I've already done it in Illustrator. So I'll show that at the very end. If I forget, please remind me. Anyway, so we'll take that piece. I'll get out a rendered view so that my computer doesn't shut down. And let's go ahead and get that shot, right? After all, you know, oh man, I already messed it up, right? Anyway, so let's go ahead and do picture and get that in there. So of course it'll come from my screenshot. And as long as I hold shift, it'll keep it in proportion. So that's sweet. Now I'll double click on this again. Oh, I don't want to do it on this viewport. That's okay. Set view, top. Let's do it to this viewport, double click. It locks in that view perfectly. Now I can highlight the whole thing, and my goodness, this is the best part. Make 2D. So much easier. Of course, make sure you're on the right viewport, right? Of course, it'll say iteration view 1. Apply. And voila. All that hard work simplified. Now here comes the fun part, which of course will be done in Illustrator. So you'll take that image that you either render or screenshot, right? And it's okay if it's either or. If you want to start getting familiar with the render stuff, I will start going over that a little bit later. But again, you know, use your intuitive skills. Now in our case here, what we want to do is of course move this so that it aligns with the exact drawing. So in my case, I want to get that exact point. And to be fair, this is honestly probably a little bit easier to do in Rhino first and transfer it over there. However, transferring pictures from Rhino files to Illustrator doesn't seem to work so well. So very often, I end up having to put the image back in Illustrator anyway. And as you can see, it's a pretty pixelated image, so no matter what, I'm not going to get it exact because it doesn't exist. I mean, look, that line just won't be a line because it's a rasterized image, which is the failures of Photoshop, but I digress. So we'll put it there, and we basically just need to scale it. So I'm going to hold shift, that way that it is proportional, and get it really, really close. In fact, it won't get close if I didn't double click and save this viewport. So do keep that in mind. If you're kind of sitting there like, man, Professor Barrett, this just won't line up, it's not working, chances are it's either become unproportional, like you accidentally messed with the proportions a little too much, or the view itself is just not the exact same view, right? So we do need the exact same view. Now of course I'm going to play around with it a little bit, holding shift of course every single time, and trying to dial it in perfectly. In fact, I might have to move it around a little bit more. Oh man, we are so close. Obviously a little bit bigger. Could probably just line it with that line on the ground. Getting pretty close, very close there. But what's nice about this, and I guess we could actually change the photo too, right? If that's easier for you, some people it is, some people it's not. We can dial it in just fine. But nicely enough, we can take the material itself. We'll take that one. I'll go to my properties and give it some transparency. Take that down a little bit. There we go. That way we can start to see some of those lines that are happening. But essentially, we want to still give a line drawing for now this shade and shadow quality that we didn't have to calculate for nothing, right? I know Ed might not know this yet, but how many of you guys have taken graphics 2? Probably a lot of us. Do you remember calculating a 2-point perspective all by hand, right? And of course, if you took me in graphics 2, we kind of did this also in Rhino, right, to kind of express it. But no matter what, whether it's a perspective, whether it's an isometric, it does need to be a line drawing. Now, as you can see, I still need to line mine up pretty well. And so the transparency might help a little bit. I might still need to shrink it or make it a little bit bigger. Again, make sure that you hold shift and that it stays proportional. It's very easy to get out of proportion and suddenly you're trying to line up something that just won't line up because now the proportions have changed. Anyway, I know I'm repeating myself, but I'll leave it at that for today, just because really the next step is putting these two views, if you will. So I'm just going to copy those. Really the last step is composing. All right, so taking those and of course putting those on. So I may need to make them a little bit smaller. And again, a reason why we're not so focused on scale yet is because it's impossible to scale a perspective. After all, it is stereographic. So for shits and giggles, we'll just say that there's 2 there, right? And I'll leave that up to you, how you want to diagram or show us both your composition that it came from, and it's okay if it's at scale or not. Actually, I think in the past we have made this one to scale. You know, if you know how to do it, graphic scale. So that doesn't mean that it's locked into a scale, it just means that it has a graphic scale. So that graphic scale starts to indicate you know, how many feet or what, right? Since we know that this is 5 feet, right? 30 divided by 6 or 30 divided by 5, oh, sorry, 6 feet. I can start to go, okay, well, here's my graphic scale, and I can start to put 0 feet, Obviously not that big. It's kind of ridiculous. 0 and copy, and 6. So technically I can start to think about scale. I mean, don't get me wrong. For those of us who have already taken D3 or are in D3, you probably owe it to yourself for a little graphic scale practice. Probably wouldn't hurt you. If you haven't even taken D1 yet, I wouldn't worry about this so much. Again, we're going to start talking scale and things like that, and it's very simple. But I want to get a bulk of the hard stuff out of the way, and then get simpler. I mean, why not? Otherwise, any questions so far, guys? For the most part, I think a lot of fun. It's a little bit more getting into the zone, I think. A little bit, definitely much more architectural, and starts to really relate to something that you could use and do in studio, which is why it's the beginning of our first computer graphics project. Obviously, we're going to have a series of exercises that really build on this, so it is definitely in your best interest to keep track of all the stuff that you're producing. And try some different models, guys. Eventually I'm going to have you pick one of them and we're going to make it. So give yourself some options, have some fun, right? In fact, there used to be a professor here that said if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right, in architecture. He also used to say if you're not struggling in architecture, you're also not doing it right. So I don't know, my theory was that he says struggling is fun. I don't know if I agree, but I definitely have fun when I do this, so hopefully you do too, and can see the potential in it. I mean, my gosh, that would take a little while in D1, right? No questions? We'll leave it at that for today in terms of the recording, and I'll get that uploaded by the end of today.